So, but tell me about the Kickstarter, because it's going to be 3 books, and I saw that, and I thought it was going to be a trilogy, but that's not exactly what you're doing, is it?
I mean, that's pretty much what editing is. You've written the book, and now you're like, what am I doing? Staring at it and like, how do I make this book work?
And so one thing I know about you, Rob, is that you've done quite a few different interesting jobs.
I love it. That's brilliant.
This fantasy author is taking on a new writing project that's so ambitious. The best comparison I can think of was written and released over the course of decades. I recently had the opportunity to talk to Rob J. Hayes, a full-time author who has been writing and publishing books professionally for many years. But after so many years of this work, where he's written and published around 20 books, Rob wanted to give himself a new challenge. His new project reminds me of Star Wars in that it's a trilogy of trilogies. But the difference here, besides being an epic fantasy rather than a soft sci-fi, is that Rob is releasing each book one in each of the trilogies at the same time. Which is nuts. This just kind of blows my mind. Imagine being introduced to young Anakin Skywalker in the prequels at the same time as we're introduced to Princess Leia and Luke in the original movies, as well as Rey in the sequel trilogy that was most recent. It's amazing. And I'm just thinking about all the different ways that there could be interrelations, and the fact that we could have the I am your father type moment when we're getting introduced to Anakin Skywalker through the prequel trilogy at the same time. This could be amazing. Rob's decided to run a Kickstarter campaign to help him make this project even more epic by being able to include art and other goodies with the success of the campaign. But when I talked to Rob before the campaign started, he was admittedly nervous. Could he pull this off? Together we had a fun conversation talking about everything from this upcoming Kickstarter as well as his average day, and some of the jobs he had before he was a writer, and the story around his amazing profile photo. Hello, my friends. Thank you for joining me. I'm Nicholas W. Fuller. I'm a writer, I'm a gamer, and on my YouTube channel I like to talk about books and games, look for cool ways to talk about both. But today, it's time for another episode of Person Behind the Pages, where I get to talk with authors and creators that make the things we love. I am thrilled to be bringing to you today a wonderful conversation I'm about to have with Rob J. Hayes. Hi, Rob.
Hello. How's it going?
If you don't know Rob J. Hayes, he's amazing. He's a former co-host of Wizard Warriors and Words podcast, where I heard of him, and he was, providing all sorts of writing advice and quips, and made me laugh, so that was fun. He's the winner of the 2017 self-published fantasy blog off, which is, he beat out 299 other great books, so, kind of a big deal. He's a finalist in other years with other books. He's a full-time novelist, and he's written, what is it, Rob? How many books do you actually have out now?
Written or published? I've published, at this point in time, I've published 19 books.
Okay.
As for written, more.
More.
Quite a few more. In fact, very soon I'll have over 20 books published, because I'll be releasing a few more. It's very soon next year.
Yeah. I wish I had someday you're like hashtag goals that I'd love to have that many books. But also, Rob, you have one of the most amazing author headshots I've ever seen. I'll put it on screen for people to see, but you look like you could be like one of the main supporting characters from Winterfell and Game of Thrones. Like you got like couple little daggers on your hip, this wonderful fur, kind of this nice like rocky but tree and grassy landscape behind. Bro, like, what is the story behind this picture? I'm not going to believe that you just have like this outfit hanging in your closet all the time, although if you did, that'd be amazing. But
I used to.
How did this come to be?
Okay, so I've always wanted an epic author picture. Like, have you ever seen John Gwynn's off a picture where he's sat there on a throne and he's got an axe across his lap and a couple of mastiffs beside him, and it's like, yeah.
Amazing.
So I've always wanted an epic one, and I used to do Viking reenactment. So we used to have all sorts of gear, and would go and smack each other around with axes and spears, and sometimes in front of a crowd. We decided to go and do a photo shoot down. There's a valley about half an hour away from where I live. So we all piled into a car and got our Viking reenactment gear and went and did a bunch of shots, and that one just happened to line up perfectly with the gambeson on and a bit of fur. The fur wasn't mine, I borrowed that bit, but the gambeson and the axes, they were mine. I've given them away now because I don't do the reenactment anymore, but for a while they were just happily hanging in my closet smelling, because gambesons smell.
I guess you don't need that. The gambeson is the big like jacket type thing, I'm assuming.
Yeah, you generally wear it sort of underneath like chainmail or plate or whatever. But
sure,
I was too poor to afford chainmail. I was I was like a serf. I couldn't afford that. I didn't even have a sword. I had an axe.
There you go. I mean, what more do you need? That sounds very Viking. But yeah, the gambeson might be a bit much to kind of just go down for some coffee or a pint, right? I get it.
It was quite warm.
All the time.
You'd start sweating.
Yeah, that I do believe. I bet, yeah, especially while you're out there actually fighting, work up a huge sweat. That's kind of fun. I didn't know that you were doing the Viking reenactment stuff, and you got paid for it, so that's pretty amazing. So that's a great segue though, because this show is all. Well, okay, but you still got paid. You can say that you were a professional Viking reenactor because you got paid for it the one time. And as far as I'm concerned, that's like if you got paid, then you were professional at least that one time, right? Right?
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll accept that, except for the fact that it was pretty much just enough to buy a pint down the pub, maybe two. It wasn't exactly a lot, but
fair. I mean, it wasn't a good paying job, but it was still, yeah. But this is a great segue, because one of the things I love to talk about on this show is, we're trying to get to know the person a little bit beyond kind of just your creative works. And so one thing I know about you, Rob, is that you've done quite a few different interesting jobs. The list, I believe, is quite varied, and we can't even get into all of it, but a couple stood out. So aquatic research assistant, I would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Okay, so I studied zoology at university. Got myself a degree in zoology just because I thought, hey, I like animals. I'll go to university and study animals. And then when I finished that, I was trying to pursue it as a career still. And one of the options available was obviously like research assistant and the like. And I'd always wanted to go and spend some time on a desert island as well, so I signed up to be a marine research assistant in Fiji. I spent 3 months on a desert island beach.
As far as places go, that you got good location there.
Oh yeah, no, it was absolutely wonderful. It was like it was an island. We were on one side of the island, and there was a little like village full of Fijians on the other side of the island, and there was very little interaction with them, to be honest. It was mostly just, hey, there was like 12 of us just on this little island, pretty much on our own, just going out and researching the coral reefs every day. But it didn't work out. I decided while I was out there, hey, you know what, I want to be a writer, so I decided to pursue this as a career instead.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that was when you so I want to get into more jobs, but like, have you always been a bit of a writer? Like, were you writing when you were very young, and then when you were out in Fiji, you're like, you know what, I'm going to take this seriously and make this into a career? Or was there a moment while you were in Fiji where you were like, I should write? How did that sort of happen?
No, it was more the latter. I've always sort of, well, not always, I have to guess, but for a long time I've been writing. I used to do some terrible fanfic. I wrote some like Buffy fanfic and Star Wars fanfic when I was younger. Oh, it wasn't good. And then a few just sort of short stories here and there. And I kept sort of like, an idea would pop into my head, and I'd write a story around it, usually a few thousand words or whatever. But it wasn't until I was out at Fiji. I took this little leather notebook with me. The idea being I'd keep a journal of all my thoughts. I'd be all pretentious and be like, hey, here's a journal of all my thoughts while I'm out here on this desert island. And instead I wrote stories in it. So I was
That's cool.
happily writing down a few stories, and at some point I started one that I thought, hey, this could actually turn into a much longer sort of idea book type thing. So when I got back, I decided, let's take it a bit further, and just started building on it, turned it into a full-length book, then scrapped it because it was a pile of shit.
I was gonna ask if that's one of the ones that came out, and but I guess not. But that's the way it goes, you know. I mean, Sandoz got it wasn't until his 13th book that he finally got one of them published, his rewrite of his 6th book, I think. So, you know, you're in good company.
Yeah, I think there are some authors who do get their first book published or whatever, but I think a lot of us have written quite a few things before we get around to publishing a book.
Yeah, right. Yep. That's cool though. So the aquatic research assistant was right after university, it sounds like, and you kind of decided, well, I'm going to go write. But you did have a few jobs after, right? You were a chef and a barman. Also, which that sounds kind of fun, and I would love to hear about maybe like your favorite dishes or drinks to make, or like worst guest experiences. But I have to imagine you also were an insurance salesman. That I feel like has to be the one that when you have a bad day of writing, you're like, well, at least it's not that.
Oh yeah, no. The insurance sales was absolutely horrific. The only good thing about it was I didn't cold call people. It was people calling into me to sell it. But no, it was horrible. There was always like this horrible spiel you had to read, and the worst bit about it was I was working for, I think it was a company called Norwich Union. I don't think they even exist anymore. I think it got taken over by another bank or something like that. But they had an advert at the time where they had this little jingle where right at the end they went, "Quote me happy," and that was the thing. And then people used to ring up and they'd actually say, "I want you to quote me happy," and I'd be like, "Just die in a fire." I did not last long at that job.
Yeah, right. I don't think I would either. Yep. But what about the chef and the barman? What sort of like dishes did you make while you were a chef?
I was starters and desserts, so there was a hell of a lot of salads. I made a lot of salads, and cakes. Although to be honest, the cakes we didn't really make them; they just came as cakes, and we just portioned them out into plates and then went, "There you go." Yeah,
secret. Right?
So, but I was never the best chef. I got told off quite a lot because I wasn't fast enough. So when everything got really, really busy, they quite often went, "Right, get out the way. We're going to do this. You go and do some pot washing." I was like, "But I'm making something lovely." And they're like, "No, just put it on the plate."
I worked for a little while at a Chinese restaurant. And, you know, I did deliveries. I did like front of house, but I also was like a fry cook for a little while. Man, yeah, kitchens are a stressful place, and like, so I did kind of have fun, and I would make like the Chinese dudes like laugh because like orders would come in, and I'd be like, "Oh," like, and that was sort of funny. But then like the owner of the place was like, "You can't do that. You're doing it loud enough for like customers to hear, and like that's gotta stop." I'm like, "My bad, sorry." But that was, yeah. So throughout all these different work, I guess you were also starting to write and writing more things that eventually you were publishing, deciding they were good enough to publish.
I mean, I continued to sort of like jot down a few ideas here and there, but I didn't start writing properly until afterwards. After I came back from Fiji, I got another temporary job doing something. What did I do after I got back from Fiji? That's it. I worked for the government for a bit, sort of, on immigrations and visas and whatnot, you know, which was also not particularly fun. But on the plus side, I met my wife at that job, so hey, something good came out of that.
Something good.
And while I was doing that, I was also writing full-length books, trying to find something which I thought was good enough to get published. And during that time, I wrote The Ties That Bind, which is the first trilogy that I ever published. So I wrote those, and then it was about 2013, I think it was, sort of April 2013 or something, where I released them. And they sold really well, and I went, great, fuck this job, I'm out. And I never went back to the grind. Now I am an author, full time.
Nice. That's pretty cool. I actually didn't realize that you did went full time right then. Very nice.
Yeah, well,
so
I was lucky. I released my first trilogy back at the sort of the gold rush of self publishing. Back when Amazon was still really heavily pushing it, and they did a lot of the heavy lifting to try and get books out there because they wanted it to be a success, which obviously they succeeded at. So they helped push my book. It's something that doesn't happen these days so much, unfortunately, so it's a lot harder to get started. So I kind of lucked into being fairly successful, and then spent a few years not being fairly successful and going, oh my god, do I need to get a new job, a real job?
A real job, yeah. But so far you've managed to avoid that. Also, listen, I hear you, and I think it's good to have the mindset of some luck is involved, but at the same time, it wasn't luck that wrote the book, so you there's some work involved too, and there's some credit.
That's fair, but I'm British, and I automatically sort of go towards humility. It's just something we do, Oh, no, it's got nothing to do with me. I was just lucky this entire time.
Well, I mean, again, I think that's kind of a good mindset, but I like to toot my guest's horn a little bit, and you've done some good things. But as you mentioned, you're full-time author. You have been for a while. What is your average day like? What is your routine? What is also kind of your writing or drafting routine?
I've got a very scheduled routine most days. If I'm writing, I sort of I'll get up, I'll do any admin I have to do, which usually takes about an hour. So I wake up about 8 o'clock, and by 9 o'clock I'm usually sat there writing, and I'll write for a good couple of hours, and then the dog will tell me that she needs to go for a walk, quite firmly, looking at me like,
trying to do.
It's time, and it's like, okay. So I'll take the dog for a walk,
okay. Right.
Then come back, do a little bit more writing, have a bite of lunch, then do some more writing until it's time to walk the dog again, and then I usually quit off at about sort of 5 o'clock. So I get most of a sort of a full length day in there. But then that's only the writing days. There's the editing days, there's the plotting days, there's all sorts. So it really depends on what I'm, what sort of form the authoring is taking at the time. So editing can be a lot more sort of broken up between doing this then, this now, taking a break because editing drives me insane. And then plotting, the plotting phase is the most weird because a lot of the time I don't feel like I'm doing anything. I'm just I'm just sitting around, or I'm just going for a walk. But it's all going on up there at the time, isn't it? So.
Right. Yeah. Idea generation is an important part of the process too. But I'm with you also though. I feel like I kind of have a little bit of a handle on how to draft and process for draft, but editing for me, I haven't written nearly as many books as you have, don't have the experience, so I'm still a little bit what am I doing with the editing process, trying to figure out how to make it work. It feels a little nebulous, feels a little weird.
I mean, that's pretty much what editing is. You've written the book, and now you're like, what am I doing? Staring at it and how do I make this book work?
Right. Yes. Agreed. So when you kind of punch out from the job at the evening, I believe I heard you have a D&D group. When are you kind of playing D&D? You played some video games from time to time as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, the D&D's fairly sporadic. At the moment, we're sort of between campaigns. and some of our players have some life things going on, like new children and the like. They tend to disrupt the whole gaming experience.
As a parent of a 2.5-year-old, yes, they do. Yeah.
So unfortunately, not much in the way of D&Ding at the moment. But I've got a PlayStation and an Xbox, so I get some gaming on there. I've got a hell of a lot of books on my TBR, so I get a fair bit of reading done. And then there's obviously a dog and a wife that require attention. Who knew?
The dog looking at you for walks. When you play D&D, are you the DM, or are you just
oh god no
players?
I would hate to DM. Like, I spend all day in my own head, in my own worlds. The last thing I want is to jump onto a D&D group and be like, oh yeah, now you're playing in my world. No, I want to play in somebody else's. It also helps that our group has an absolutely fantastic DM, and he's sort of like, he does like voices. He's great at just doing things off the cuff and just making things up on the fly and all of that lot. And I'm just like, nah, I can't do that. What you do is magic, and just you do you. I'll sit there and, like, if I want some dialogue, I can't just do it off the top of my head. I have to craft it on a keyboard. I've got mad respect for DMs or GMs, whatever they are. Just what they do is like, can't do that. It's amazing.
You've got so many books out, Rob, that clearly you have tons of ideas. We were even talking before we were recording about some of your upcoming books, which sounds awesome ideas. What is your process for deciding what you're going to write amongst clearly what must be a bunch of ideas going on there?
I never used to have much of a process. I used to just be like, oh, that sounds like a cool idea. Let's write it, a book. That's where Never Die came from. I was kind of like, I was in a really weird headspace of just like, the last book I'd written just hadn't worked, and it was trash, and I didn't know what I was doing. And then the idea for Never Die just popped into my head. I was like, yeah, you know what? Let's write a martial arts film, but as a book. So I did it. And funnily enough, the book that I'm actually writing at the moment, because I'm so anxious about the whole Kickstarter thing that I've got going on, that I've decided what I'm going to do to hide from that is write a book. So the book I'm writing at the moment is just one that popped into my head, and it's like Kings of the Wild meets Gideon the Ninth, meets Thelma and Louise. There's an old Monster Hunter female duo doing a road trip across the country, trying to fight a big old Colossus type thing, and there's a lot of craziness going on, and it's just fun. So that's kind of the way I like to do it. It doesn't always work. If you've got a series, you can't really do it that way. But if you're just sort of like writing standalones, you can just be like, hey, what's this crazy idea that's in my head? Let's write it! Yay!
Yeah.
But then I also write series, and those take a bit more planning and thought about it.
Boy, I have a few different points. Okay, one.
Oh yeah, by the way, my brain just runs all over the place. So you feel free to just cut in and be like, fantastic. No, stop. We need to talk about that for a moment.
No. I love it. This is fantastic. One, that sounds like a very Brandon Sanderson way of dealing with kind of stress. Like, I'm gonna go write another book. Two, I think if you're chasing the fun, that's where the magic is, right? That concept sounds wacky but awesome. I love the road trip and former, but yeah, that sounds cool. But tell me about the Kickstarter, because it's gonna be 3 books, and I saw that and I thought it was gonna be a trilogy, but that's not exactly what you're doing, is it?
So the Kickstarter is for phase 1 of the God Eater saga, which is basically it's set in a world where human beings can gain magic and immortality by eating angels, which I thought was a really cool concept, to be honest. But then I decided to make the concept even more crazy by saying I am going to write it as a saga, so it's going to be a trilogy of trilogies, and I'm going to write them and publish them concurrently. So I'm writing all 3 book ones. Well, I've written all 3 book ones, which is what phase 1 is for. That's what the Kickstarter is for. 3 book ones of 3 trilogies set in the same saga. And then I'm going to be writing all 3 book 2s at the same time and all 3 book 3s at the same time.
Yeah, ambitious. I love it. I can't even. So it is the 3 different book 1s. Are they all are the storylines happening at the same point and they're following different characters, or is it like are the storylines happening at different points? And are they do the books generally follow only one character, or are they sort of like ensemble stories?
So they're set at different points. So there's basically what I call the main trilogy, which is the one that's sort of like happening in the present, as it were. That's starting with Herald. That's the big epic fantasy, chunky fantasy, and that's obviously it's the longest one, and that's got multiple point of views. Then there are 2 prequel trilogies. Okay. The first of which is set 3,000 years prior to Herald, and the second of which is set 1,000 years prior to Herald, and both of those follow a single character each.
It's like you're writing Lord of the Rings and the Rings of Power and the Silmarillion all at the same time.
Yeah, it's one of those things. When I try to explain it, because of the way my brain jumps around a lot, it just sounds like a total mess and like I'm just mad. But I do actually have it all planned and plotted out, and it does make sense, I promise. But the reason I'm doing it this way, the reason I'm writing it at the same time, but across 3 trilogies, is it allows me to sort of interweave the narratives in a way so that there will be some reveals that are happening 3,000 years ago, which will shed a new light on the things that are happening in the future or in the present. So as a reader, you might see something that's happening in the past, and it makes something that's happening in the present, and you're going, that's not exactly how it seems, because that happened, which means this is different, and vice versa. So hopefully, if I've done it right, it should mean that depending on which book you read first, you'll actually have a slightly different reading experience, because you'll have different knowledge going into each book.
That's so cool. So you're releasing them concurrently, but is there going to be like a suggested reading order, or are you just completely trying to make it so pick up whichever one you want and see how the other ones
I will happily provide a suggested reading order, but I think that really it's best if you just read whichever one you feel like first. That's kind of the idea behind it. If you decide to read Herald first, then you'll have a lot more knowledge going into, okay, I know what's happening in the present, but then you're reading something in the past, you're like, hang on a minute, but that thing I read in Herald might contradict what I read in the past, so which one's true? And then you might read the book in the middle, and you'll be like, aha!
Right. That's so cool. It kind of reminds me too of what the Mistborn books, because Sanderson has the different eras, right? So he's got the original Mistborn era, and then what is it? Not First Law? That's Abercrombie. But
no, it's
he's got the other era.
Alloy of Law.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think he wants to do like another era in the future. But so you're kind of doing that idea, but you have book 1 and book 1 and book 1, and then later you have book 2. Man, I like it. That's pretty rad.
I like to challenge myself when writing. It's why I wrote I wrote the War Eternal books. I wrote Along the Razor's Edge, the first one of those, because I thought, you know what, I've never written a first person book before. I'm going to challenge myself and write a first person book. So I did, and it turned into an entire 5-book series. And this time round I thought, I've never written a big epic fantasy before. I'm going to jump all my feet in, all 10 of my feet straight in, and write an epic fantasy saga across 3 different timelines, all being written at the same time. Because, challenging.
Super epic. Challenge accepted, though. That's rad. Rob, thank you for being here. This has been super fun. I've enjoyed all of our talk. Where can people find and follow you online, Rob?
Okay, so you can find me at my website, which is www.robjhayes.co.uk. I'm still on Twitter. Yes, I will still be calling it Twitter. My handle there is at Rob of the Haze. I'm on Facebook with at The Heresy Within. I'm on Blue Sky now, but I could not tell you what my username is on Blue Sky for the life of me. And then I'm not sure when this is going out, but I'm also going to be on Kickstarter with my new Kickstarter campaign, which you can find by searching for The God Eater Saga.
Since recording this interview with Rob J. Hayes, the Kickstarter has now started. All 3 of the first books in the God Eater Saga are already written, and the campaign is successfully funded. That means this is happening. In fact, this is one of Rob's most successful book launches to date, so maybe he didn't have to be quite so nervous. His campaign was fully funded in just 10 minutes, wow, and it now sits at about 12 times the funding goal. With that, backers are getting extra interior art, a new dust jacket on the hardcovers, and a new short story from Rob. This project is epic. I encourage you to take a look. I am definitely going to be backing it. I think you're going to like it. Thank you for watching and spending time with me. And if no one's told you it today, you're an absolute legend.